in a stereotypical way, but really in a way that shows sort of his or her predicament. And that kind of, and then I saw a couple more, and then that kind of gave me an idea that, okay, you know, this is a medium that can have, it can have a powerful impact. It certainly had on me, because it led me to ask myself, hey, maybe I should deal with my frustrations post 9/11 by using this medium that this one cartoon connected to me. And then I've been consuming a lot of cartoons since, and I find it to be a very powerful medium because it's very simple, and it captures a lot of information and just kind of presents it in a way that is kind of edgy, humorous, and it doesn't have to use a lot of words. Sometimes there are no words in there. And so it's been a really powerful medium in that sense. And there's a reason why globally, why people love simple lines and few words. And it's gets pretty quickly to our brains and our hearts and makes a point.
Definitely. I definitely agree with Vishavjit. And I want to hone in on one of your storylines in the film. We see you dressed as Captain America, and this is a persona that you frequently take on to give talks and speeches and to connect with people across the country. And I think seeing that is really powerful. I think how you physically insert yourself into spaces that you might not, they might not be as open because they might not know who you are, and you're directly kind of challenging what it is that people should think about who Captain America is and what Captain America looks like. For you personally, did you feel like when you take on that persona, it's easier for you to connect with others than it is if you were to just kind of to go out into the world as you are, just as a regular human being with a Sikh identity?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I didn't, when I first did this, it was, I mean, I had a vision in my head, hey, maybe Captain America should be somebody who represents America. And I know Eileen and Harleen and even Keith in the film, you know, we talk about representation, which is seeing characters who look like you in broader culture. And so I mean, I've not seen that character, of course, until Eileen created Super Sikh. But at the time, I had not seen anyone. This is going back 7-8 years ago when I had this sort of vision one day, which I sketched into an illustration of a Captain America with a turban and beard. And I thought that was the end of it. And it just so happens somebody requested that I don the uniform. I refused. It took them a year to convince me, because in my head, you know, I have my own body image issues. So I'm like, well, I'm not going to wear a uniform to attract more attention on me. And honestly, I didn't know if it was going to, what does that mean, me donning a uniform? So it took really somebody else who happens to be Jewish, Brazilian, a woman, to sort of convince me to do that. And so I tried it. I was super nervous and super anxious doing this. I knew what I was doing. I knew what she wanted me to do. I knew, hey, we're pushing the sort of the boundaries here, but I really didn't know how people were going to respond. And it turned out people responded really well, in the sense that it really flipped the sort of the narrative to the extent that I could never fathom. I mean, people do treat me as if, oh, wow, he's one of our own. He's American, right? So there's no question mark on me being an American when I don the uniform, which is really bizarre because Captain America is not a real character. Even little kids know this when I go to schools. But somehow the story, the fictional story, is just powerful enough where it just messes with our stereotypes and perceptions. And again, it goes back to how powerful stories can be, that they just confuse even highly educated or people who have learned biases for 50, 60, 70 years. It is just enough to confuse them into going, hey, because I've engaged with people who I know do not agree with me, who don't even know I'm Sikh, who probably are thinking all the worst things on the planet, but they will engage with me for a few minutes. They'll take photos with me, off me. And that's the power of, you know, of fictional stories. So that's why I'm very sort of, although I was hesitant the first few times, I will don this uniform again and again, and I go into different settings because I know it's going to have, hopefully, that connection and, you know, leave something positive.
Yeah, I mean, if we see it in the film, we see reactions from people who see you on the street, and you see that they're surprised, but you see that they're warm, they're in tune to it. And I think seeing you personally in that role as well, through different talks and speeches over the last couple of years, I've seen it as well. It's a bit of a shock at first, I think, for non-Sikh audiences. but they warm up to it. And then for Sikh audiences as well, seeing someone who is Sikh, but then also in a role that they thought, was just for one type of person, it's really powerful for them as well to feel represented. And Eileen, I think segueing over to gender and you being a female comic creator, for me as a female as well, and I'm sure for all of the females who've joined us today on this call, it's really impactful to see someone who in this space is taking up space, who space might not have been made for, and above all is writing action scripts, which is really kind of amazing when you think of what females are traditionally supposed to like. And so for you, you're centering the role of a Sikh male. You have Deep Singh, but then as the film touches on, you also have female characters. You have Gurpreet and you have Janelle. And just kind of for people who haven't had a chance to read the books, can you share a bit more about why you decided to create those characters and why you felt it was so important to kind of center their stories in, I guess, a larger story that's already kind of centering someone who you wouldn't see on the daily?
Sure. So there are several characters. I guess we'll just overall, I should say, my approach to the characters in general that it's fun for me to do as a writer is to kind of unpack layers of them as I tell the story. So one convention that people use often is just to kind of give a backstory of the character. But I find it more interesting to kind of tease that out and challenge people to sort of really understand who the character is, watch how they act, and let that kind of inform you in the storytelling. And so I brought in female characters because that's reality. They're females are all around the male characters, and it's almost like for me it feels forced to try to pigeonhole them into some weird way. They're everywhere, so you talk about them by naturally, right? So I bring in Deep Singh's cousin, Rajanpreet Kaur, and in his world, she's a vital part of his kind of operation as a hero. So she's kind of in the laboratory, and she's a scientist, and she's really the one behind the scenes who makes him successful in many ways, right? So she's a big part of his world, even though she's not like physically, stature is not there. Her physicality is not there compared to Deep. She can certainly put him in his place because of their relationship, and she knows where she stands with him. So I like to bring that out, that there's other dimensions here. He's not kind of a one-dimensional figure, and she's sort of the sidebar. She's kind of equal. Then the other character that I brought in is Janelle Walker, another character that I thought it was interesting to kind of unpack. This African-American woman that Deep Singh encounters on his journey. And in the beginning, when he first encounters her, he thinks that she's kind of a damsel in distress. And he kind of, makes this kind of initial assumption about the situation she's in, but really there's a lot more to that story. And you realize that she's a super strong character. She's just kind of having a conflict, an inner conflict. And so that's another thing that I enjoyed to kind of like reveal as he got to know her and kind of question his own assumptions about what was going on. So just this kind of like the writer's perspective that, you get to talk about things that maybe have happened to you, or you have gotten to know people and you think that they're one way, but then you really realize there's all this other, aspect to them. It's kind of a natural evolution, and you kind of get to appreciate people that way. And so I just really enjoyed writing it, bringing those female characters to life just in the same way that you would a male character, and revealing them and their complexity, and there's more to the story.
Mm-hmm.
Rajanpreet, I'd just like to add a couple of things. One about Vish. I remember you talking about perceptions of Captain America. I remember going to Calgary, and a lady comes up to me, and she tells me that one thing that will always stay with me is his image. That Captain America really can be anybody. It's not about the outside, it's what's inside. So I think the film at some level did help change those perceptions. And on a personal front, I have two daughters, Raisa and Suhavi. So they have only seen Wish, right? So when they look at a comic book as well, which has a Captain America, they actually say, look at that. They are wearing Wish Uncle's dress. So it's the other way around. So I think, there are changes in perception as well. And the second thing is about Eileen. You're talking about, somebody who didn't know about the culture and didn't know who Sikhs are. She has embraced Sikhi. She learned the Gurmukhi. She goes for Gurbani Vichar and has learned dhol, has learned how to cook Punjabi food. So it wasn't just creating a character out of thin air. It was about embracing the whole culture, understanding what the thinking would be for Deep Singh, and then penning it down. So I think, both of them have done exceptionally well because they really understand what impact their work would have.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think I'm actually glad that you spoke up, Harleen. I think it's a great segue to I want to get deeper into representation and kind of, Eileen, what you were saying about the two female characters who are in the Super Sick comics, Janelle and Gurpreet. They're characters that they're not just there as an accessory, they're characters that help develop the story along sort of roles in the plot of the story. Whereas I think more in mainstream media, often when you see female characters, they are kind of more in those types of accessory roles where if you were to take them out, the story would still advance without them. And I think that's really impactful. And I think just seeing both you, Eileen, and you, Harleen, as women kind of in this space is really important for the people who are with us and watching today, because the career paths you're in, they're not traditional career paths that one would consider. I think especially in the Punjabi community and the Sikh community, but just kind of more broadly as well, being a filmmaker, being a comic creator, and kind of for yourself, how did you go above, what was expected of you and from society, maybe even from your own community? If so, like, how did you go above that and still follow through with what it is that you wanted to do?
Eileen, you want to go first?
Sure. Well, for me, it's a juggling act. I think, I have friends who are, doing art professionally, who, will at times have to make compromises because there's a paycheck associated with their art, right? So there's a balance between the commerce and the art, and what stories you want to tell versus what stories you need to, pay your bills, to tell those stories to pay your bills. And that's a juggling act. That's one path. The path that I have chosen is to kind of separate that. So I have, my day job and I have my art, and I try to keep them a little bit more separate because I enjoy having more freedom in the storytelling piece, right? So it's always, you're making trade-offs as you go, right? As an artist, about how you organize your life, really. And then as a parent also, right? So there's another aspect of juggling that was involved in my life. But ultimately what I had to come to a decision about who I was, in my life, who my kids would see me as, and they look at me, really. Am I living the life that I'm telling them to live, right? If I'm selling, pursue your dreams, anything is possible, but not that, right? Like I didn't feel, it felt contradictory or hypocritical to sort of try to, encourage them to do that if I wasn't living that myself. And so that's how I started to really try to find the balance, to do art and to do, what I needed to do to pay the bills as a single mom and stuff, but still, be that for them. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's how I've sorted things for myself, I guess.
And you've done it exceptionally well. So you're a rock mama and you do so many things. So kudos to you and for inspiring all the others. I just want to share my story. My dad was in the Indian Army, generations in the Army for that matter. And, we actually went through a lot of changes. Sorry, my daughter is outside. But the idea was that just pursue your dreams. I did my master's, I did my MBA, I did my corporate life for 10 years. But there was a time in my life where I was like, if I have to do something, then it's right now. So I quit my corporate job at the time. And I said, all right, I know media because I started my career with National Geographic Channel. And I understand marketing. So I said, I want to do something here. But I didn't know what. But the common thread over there was something to do with Sikhi. I don't know what, but something to do with Sikhi. So it started with creating a podcast series on Sikh history, which even Sikh Coalition and SikhNet and some of the others have featured. So the idea was to create Sikh history podcasts, which are in English, which are bite-sized, which are like 17, 20 minutes, which you can hear while you're driving. And they were factual. We went back to sources, etc. And after that, we thought that while audio is great, it's the visuals which will make an impact. So we created one documentary, we did well, went to a few festivals. And then from there, we had the confidence of going forward and creating this documentary as well. So that's how the journey has begun. And now I'm on my third documentary, where the idea is again to pursue a larger thing of how do we overcome challenges. So what I really feel, anybody listening out there is the idea is that, you don't have to be a lawyer or a doctor or, just follow your passion. Yes, you have to pay your bills. But at the end of the day, we as Sikhs need to encourage creative arts. Support Eileen, support all the work that Vish is doing. If you know somebody, some school, some college, where they can come and give presentations, just encourage it. Just go a little forward and, help all the artists that are out there, because we need the support. So that's where we are.
If I could add one thing too, I think that's interesting, just to tie it back to kind of like what can you give back and how do you, kind of keep encouraging more to happen. I just really encourage people to try narrative fiction and to try to do things in that lane, even, poetry, things that are very that just come from the imagination. And it's not to diminish anything relative to history or relative to traditional stories and sakis. I mean, none of that is diminished in any way by taking the other path of fiction. I wish that there was more, because when I was researching for the comic, it was very hard to find. And I think, it's natural in terms of Sikh history that, Sikh history has been squashed in so many ways through partition and through genocide, and there's a strong need to keep that history alive. But I just hope that it's not kept alive at the expense of doing other things too. So I think there's not one or the other. I think it can be both. And I would just love to see people try that and just express themselves. I think it's so beautiful to see.
Yeah, I definitely agree, Eileen. And you're making me think back to this question about representation and the type of stories that are out there. So I think my question to all of you is just, in terms of getting stories out there that are more diverse, that do represent everyone, who do you think the onus and the responsibility kind of falls on to create those stories? For example, if there is a kid watching today who wants to grow up and also become a comic book writer or an illustrator, is it their responsibility that the characters that they're creating need to look like them? Do you think the responsibility falls on others? I would love to just kind of get your thoughts on that.
Vish, do you want to go for this?
Yeah, I mean, I could take it in a few different directions, Rajan. It depends on, there's a broader society we live in. There are structures in there are inequities in that system. I'm going to go the other route, which is within our community, because I do feel part of the onus is within Sikh institutions and communities and our gurdwaras and other organizations. And as Harleen was mentioning earlier, broadly, ours is a community that is not very supportive of the arts, right? We are somebody who, for a variety of complicated reasons, short history, very persecuted history, we are a community that is sort of in survival mode, but then very quickly from survival mode, it's kind of gone into, okay, let's have a comfortable sort of, lifestyle. Work hard. The Sikhs are one of the most hardest working people on the planet. But I think what is ironic is our history, the source of Sikhi is through words, right? We talk about Guru Granth Sahib Ji, our living spiritual guide. Those are words, and gurus used music, ragas to, not ragas, but basically they used music, basically, essentially, right? To sort of talk about what Sikhi and its core is. But what's happened is today, where are the poets, right? Where are the writers? When I say poets and writers, I mean people who are professionally full-time pursuing those professions, right? There's a few who exist, I know a few of them, but as a community, as parents, as gurdwaras, as our institutions, we don't financially support them, because that's what it means at the end of the day, right? You got to financially support them. You got to pay the bills, as Eileen was saying. And so I would say part of that onus is on our institutions, or lack thereof. We need to remind ourselves our gurus were artists. We've had many other artists in our community. We need to respect that. We need to connect to it. And then we need to show our support, both emotionally, physically, but most importantly, your daswant, your money should be going into supporting arts. And I just want to say this, Harleen has been, we're sitting here talking about the film. I know me and Eileen are sort of fielding your question, but Harleen spent 3 years as a storyteller trying to get this film made. And I know, Rajan, you mentioned you can shoot hundreds of hours, and Harleen can tell you how many hours she shot. There's a lot of work that went behind the scenes. Harleen put in a lot of her time and money to make this film happen. And so I would really hope that those who are listening in, please find a way to support arts in our community. That burden is on us. Do not always look at somebody else. Yes, like I said, maybe Eileen and Harleen can talk about this, but there is an onus on our community to support artists.
Yeah, I think, thank you so much, Vish. But I think the onus clearly is on our community. If really we don't tell our own stories, nobody else, you can't expect somebody else to do it. If Sikh Coalition is not fighting for the rights of people, of filing something on hate crimes, it's not going to happen. You can't wait for somebody else that, okay, that person would take it up or that organization would take it up. No, we have to show unity here as well. I think what's important is to just support each other. It's not about me, it's about us. And that's very important. And that's the crucial point here. The other thing is that, we're not talking about large sums of money, but if you have 10, 20, 50, $100, go to the Daswant Network, for example, and contribute there. Look at projects that, let's say, Sikh Coalition is supporting and just contribute there. So look at different avenues. There are multiple websites where you can just contribute a small amount, need not be a huge amount. Everybody, has certain resources. So if you can afford, just contribute. The other part is, if as Sikhs, we should support each other, bring each other up. So if there's another cartoonist, we should have some sort of a mentorship network as well, that, where Vish can mentor somebody who wants to get into cartooning, and Eileen can mentor somebody who wants to, write a comic book. Where do you even start? Where do you find the artist? Who can be the illustrator? There are just basic questions that we can all answer. If there's a filmmaker who's out there who wants support, I'm there. So I think that's the whole idea, that let's support each other and bring each other up. We're not yet there. We've not, won the Oscars of the world. We have to accomplish a lot in the creative space. And I think we've just started. One film, one thing here or there would not make a difference. But if all of us start using just our phones and capturing those important stories and putting it out there, we all can make a difference. Ek banda lakh de barabar hai. So now you just multiply those numbers and then you can go from there.
I think that's really beautifully said, Harleen. I think all three of you actually said it really beautifully. And for those of us who are watching, we'll actually be sharing all three folks' contact information after the panel. And so if you are interested in creating comics, if you are interested in illustrating, or you want to learn, what does it take to be a filmmaker, definitely please reach out to all three speakers. I know that they would be happy to help. And so we'll be sharing that contact information as well. And just for your three awareness, we actually also did a panel yesterday that was about preserving art, preserving history for summer series. And that was one of the major points brought up during this discussion was, we as a community have to start supporting the arts. We have to start valuing it just as much as we, tell our kids you should become a doctor, lawyer, engineer. That's just as important to support their creative professional careers as it is to support what we, consider to be more valuable. And so I think that was beautifully said. And Harleen, I want to touch on one of the points that you just brought up about, we have to tell our stories. Can you just break it down in the simplest form? What is a story, or what makes a good story? Because I think it would be helpful for viewers to understand that at least anything around you, in a way, is a story. Like, is there anything that they should think about, or anything that they can touch on if they want to understand how a story works and how they might want to start documenting them or writing them themselves?
Oh, wow, that will take time. But in short, I think just capture them. Don't think too much. Just go ahead and use your phone to capture these stories. In an ideal situation, you should have a beginning, middle, and end that you can give a backstory, and then you can have a forward-looking statement as well. But that, if you don't have that, that's okay. There is a grandmother out there who's making masks. Capture it. There is somebody who's actually making food and sending it out. Just capture it. I know of a lieutenant general who's just quit everything and he's now focusing on Kirtan. I mean, these are stories as well. Like, we have to just bring them out. So don't worry about the structure right now. You will get better as you get yourself trained into all of this. Practically, everybody would get better. Eileen would know that the first draft was never good, right? But as we progress, we'll all learn. And we are here to even critique. If there's a way that you've shot something, you want somebody to look at it and say, how can I better it? We are there. So reach out. We are, as people, we should all support each other and do whatever we can to make our things better as well.
Yeah, and kind of just dwelling on this topic of storytelling a bit more. For each of you, what was like the first story in your life that you kind of read that really impacted you deeply?
I can go first. So I was actually doing another session, the session that I did yesterday with the little ones as part of the Summer Kids series at Coalition. And I was thinking of sort of framing the whole workshop. I had a little puppet with me, my own puppet. And so one of the stories that I shared of a real life superhero who's had a huge impact on me when I was a kid. Although I grew up in a Sikh family, I really didn't really live Sikhi, but I did read stories, illustrated stories of Sikhs. And one of the characters who really has had a huge impact on me is Bhai Kanhaiya. Bhai Kanhaiya is from the time of Guru Gobind Singh. And the story that we all kind of know, the little part of his story, I actually don't know much about his full life story, but we know that one incident where he was in a battlefield with Sikhs and the adversaries at the time, and the battle, I guess there was a break in the battle, and he was serving water to those who were wounded on both sides. So Sikhs and on the other side. And the story is Sikhs complained about him. He goes to Guru Gobind Singh Ji. He's taken to Guru Gobind Singh Ji. Guru Gobind Singh Ji asks him, why did you give water to, is this true? Are you giving water to the other side? And he's like, yes, I did. And he's like, why? And he basically goes, because I see that jyot that you talk about, that it got in everybody. And so to me, as a little kid, I was like, wow, it's a very fantastical, amazing story. And I'm being told this is a real life character. It just had that impact where I'm like, wow, I mean, if that is reality, if that is somewhere I can experience, to me, it just sort of left an impact. And to this day, I use that as an example. That's the golden standard of what I want to be. I know I'm nowhere close to that, but I try to sort of remind myself that is the ultimate act of diversity, inclusion, and equity, because you're seeing everybody as one. It's very hard to practice it. But if Bhai Kanhaiya can do it, we know there's an example, right? And there's many others who've done it. So that to me is like a story of an incredible real life superhero.
Thank you. Eileen.
Really interesting. Yeah, I think, well, a couple of influences, I guess, specifically in comics. The first graphic novel that had an impact on me, the first one I think I really read that I studied and had an impact, was Mouse by Art Spiegelman. And that's a depiction of the Jewish Holocaust, but it's told through mice. It's illustrated as mice and rats and creatures that, so it kind of, it takes you into that story in a very different way than just kind of a very, historical retelling. And it's also told in a narrative kind of like a young person hearing this story from someone else, an elder, right? So there's elements in there that are, it's really fascinating to kind of think about in terms of storytelling. So that kind of a way into telling stories differently than you might expect was interesting to me, the creative aspect. And then the other part, I think, when I reflect on the kinds of stories that I tell, I think for me, I'm kind of telling stories to myself in a way of like, even if you're an outsider, or you can overcome these things, or I try to have like kind of some kind of a hopefulness through the struggles that's overcome. And I think in some ways I kind of continually tell that story for myself, to myself, and to share it with other people, right? In all different formats. It doesn't matter if it's, if who the character is, there's some kind of a struggle that they overcome that I enjoy getting to that end and getting that payoff of it. They did it. they accomplished it, and the journey to get there. How are they going to accomplish this? It seems like impossible or something. And then I figure out how to do it. And then the storytelling, I figure that out. And then they did this, and that's how it was. And then and so in some ways, I'm almost like giving myself some of that hopefulness, or sharing that hopefulness, and achievement. I like doing that, and so that's kind of inspiring to me in the stories that I pick to tell.
Mm-hmm.
I think for me, there were two. One was my BG, my father's mother, my Dadi ji. And, I used to always see that every time anything good or bad happened, it was always like, Guru ne kita, any papa got promotion, whatever, it was always about the Guru. And I always realized that, yes, there's a larger spirit that's out there, who's watching us. And I think that was the whole point here. And the other thing was, because my father was in the army, we traveled across the country, and Papa used to lead South Indian troops, the Madras Regiment, and it was just fascinating for me to see how he managed as a Sikh. He had to learn all four languages from the South, command those troops, and also ensure that we follow their traditions, so that he can be a good leader. So we used to go to the mandir every Tuesday and go to the Gurdwara every Sunday. So there were these things that you grew up with, that multicultural aspect is important, and respect to others is extremely important. So I think I didn't have a particular story, but these were things that sort of laid the foundation for me.
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing from all three of you was that you have these stories that have impacted you, and they've impacted you because there's a lesson, or there is a struggle, or a theme that you've kind of taken away from it, and that's always stayed with you. And I think that's what makes stories so impactful, at least the ones that we remember, because you're able to take something away. And I think bringing it back to the film, we look at all of the different examples of comics that are shown, and they're using humor, or they're using another literary tool to kind of talk about issues that are really important. A couple of the comics that I saw, Vishavjit, I love the SpongeBob one, just because it's something I never expected. I watched way too much SpongeBob growing up, but I never could see SpongeBob like that. So I thought that was super impactful. But just some of the other ones as well, like the ones that Keith had drawn, some of those had really stuck with me. And so you have these examples, and you take something away from them, and they tend to stay with you, and you learn from them. So thank you all for sharing the stories that were impactful for you. And I hope that the people watching can kind of take this time to look back and to think to themselves, like, what are the stories that have stayed with me? Whether it's something that I've read in a book, I've seen in a movie, it's something that your mom or your dad told you, like what are the stories that have stayed with you, and just kind of why. So we did have a couple questions come in through the Q&A. So I did want to shift to those just to make sure that we can kind of get to them. And they're very specific. I myself, actually, while I was talking to you all, I had to Google what does JLA mean, because that's a very specific question in here, but this is for Eileen. And so Eileen, are there any other superheroes, Asian superheroes specifically, that you're thinking of putting in your comics? And have you thought about creating some sort of pan-Asian JLA type organization?
Oh, that's interesting. I do have, Deep Singh is a member of this kind of UN, kind of loose affiliation, kind of like a UN Defense League, if you will, kind of like a Justice League. So I think that's certainly in the realm of something that could happen is the story expands and the universe expands of characters. But it's funny, I'm also hoping, because I am just one person with one particular lens. My goal with Super Sick always was to sort of be a start to something that other people can join. And so I guess I would almost reverse the question a little bit and say, is that a story that you would like to write? Mm. Would you like to see that character? And how can I help you bring that to life? That Pan-Asian character that seems to be something that, maybe is brewing and kind of coming to life in your mind. As what would you see? What would you do? Because I write from that perspective of what would I like to see. And there are so many stories that can be told. I don't have to be like the channel, the conduit for these stories. I say, let's all make stories.
Yeah. And so the person who did ask that question, if you do want to write that story, please reach out to Eileen. We will share her contact information along with everyone else after the panel, and just kind of start those conversations, because that's how a lot of times stories come to be. And Eileen, you touched on it as well, that you start out with one version, and by the end of it, it might end up looking completely different because you have all these other different ideas. And I'm sure Harleen as well, as you were putting the film together, you start with, okay, this is what the film is going to be. And by the end of it, you end up doing something that's completely different. And so Vishavjit, this other question is specifically for you. So when you were looking for, were you looking for an American superhero? Why did you choose to go with Captain America? And this person said specifically over Superman. So why did you choose to go with him over Superman? Did it have to do with Superman being an immigrant, whereas Captain America, I believe, was not, or was it something else?
Yeah, no, those are very good questions. I get asked that question all the time. Why Captain America? Why not Batman, Superman? There's so many others. So simple answer, it was a pure accident. The first year that I was planning to go to the New York City Comic-Con, one of the biggest comic festivals, as an exhibitor, I was just thinking in my head. So the Comic-Con happened in October, and in the summer I was planning and preparing, and I was thinking, should I create something that is fresh and just sort of marketing myself? And the first Captain America movie in the series that we see now came out that summer. And I didn't see that movie at the time, but I saw its posters. And I just had a vision one day. Why doesn't Captain America have, that character should represent America. That character was created a long time ago. I knew that. I didn't know it was 1941 at the time, but I learned later on. I'm thinking, well, why isn't Captain America evolving with the times? We're in the 21st century America. America is a very diverse place. And I self-project. So I'm thinking, well, Captain America should look like me. And so I didn't create it exactly in my image, but certainly a turban and beard. And I went from there. And I do feel if I had created a Superman version or a Batman version, I don't think it would have the same impact. I think there's something about Captain America, the name, the uniform, it's very American. It's very sort of, people take Captain America sort of in a very different way. And even I've engaged people who are not American, they respond to Captain America very differently compared to Superman and Batman. They're almost like, well, that's a very jingoistic, very patriotic superhero, good for you. So to me, I do feel, yeah, it was an accident, but it was a very it was a good accident because I've been able to engage with people, especially Americans, at a level that I don't think would have been possible with other superheroes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's, I mean, we see it for ourselves in the film. You're going out into public and people are seeing you in that role and they're genuinely, okay, what's going on here, and genuinely interested and also a little bit shocked. And so I think you see that for yourself in that role.
Yeah.
Just kind of looking at the time now, we should about wrap up. We're actually already running over. So that's my bad. I was not checking the time. But I did want to kind of bring the conversation back to the film. And it's a film that, you know, causes the viewer to think like, what are the biases that I might carry within myself? What are the stereotypes that I might be carrying within myself about other people? Causes you to think about that, reflect on that, and then potentially even change that as well. And not stick with always what's so traditional or what people might consider normal as the way that we've seen it, and to look beyond that. And so that was kind of my takeaway from the film. And I would love to hear what each of you think, or what each of you would like everyone else to take away who has watched the film. And then even if there are any specific action steps you'd like folks to take about confronting those biases, about confronting those stereotypes, I think that would be great to hear as well.
So I think one of the key takeaways that I'd like people to leave with is that, hey, don't judge people, get to know them, understand them before making a judgment call. So that's one thing. And the second thing that I'd like people to know is that we all have the power to change. We can there are people who are just using their pens and doing it. There are people who are much more in powerful positions who can do it. So we all have our own sort of superpower to make change happen. So do that because that's how life would move forward from here.
I think I would add, the film, you definitely see, me in my house, me like with my hair's a mess and things like, I'm just a regular person. And these kinds of topics, they're part of your life. They're part of everyone's life in some way. Everyone has this affects you, and you have the power to just, to create and be a creator in whatever shape that takes. And to open up that lens very wide around, where you take inspiration and how you make your creations manifest, and keep that lens open. And I think that it's, it's in everyone's, realm to do. I'm just a mom with these crazy ideas, and I just, put them down, and one thing leads to another. So it's doable.
Yeah, and I would add to, Eileen and Harleen. I guess one of the main message that sort of Harleen is trying to bring out is, we all engage in stereotyping and prejudices. It's how human beings are. It's a lot of work that it takes to sort of recognize it. So I think I would like to sort of connect it to what's happening right now in American society, actually globally a lot, but especially American society. We have the Black Lives Matter movement, which has been going on since 2013, and it's really sort of caught fire in many ways, and you see more and more people engaged. And one of the things that I would like, especially our Sikh community, and mostly I would focus on the Punjabi heritage Sikh community, to recognize is we have a lot of prejudices towards other communities as well. And one of those communities happens to be people of darker hue, people who have darker skin, be it in India with Dalits and be it in the US here. We have prejudices as Punjabis, and I think it'll be very important for us to recognize, do you want to become a better version of who you are? You want to be that agent of change. You have to recognize your own shortcomings first. And I would say that's the first sort of great step. And then say, how do I build bridges, and how do I help African Americans who have faced a lot more prejudices than we Sikhs have faced, in the US at least. So to me, that's the powerful message from the film that's coming in. Hey, you have these three characters who have faced prejudices and then use art to build bridges. I would say do the same, but then recognize your own prejudices and build bridges with those who you might target with your prejudices.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's beautifully said, Vishavjit. And I think a great way to end this discussion is, look at how you think about the world, challenge that, and ask yourself, what can you do in this moment? What can you do today to create a space that's just where everyone can be themselves, and everyone is treated equally, everyone is treated fairly, and the world is more just for everyone. So thank you for that. And thank you everyone for joining us tonight, to the viewers, but a big special thank you to you, Harleen, Eileen, and Vishavjit, for sharing your time, sharing your expertise with us, and also sharing this film with us, for making it a free viewing for us tonight. As I shared earlier,
it's a pleasure.
Yeah, definitely. And we do want to continue this discussion. So as I shared earlier, we will be sharing contact information for all three panelists. So if you do have story ideas, if you have questions, if I can speak for all three of you and say, if you do have anything more that you would like to ask or possibly connect on or do, take this opportunity to connect with Eileen, to connect with Harleen, to connect with Vishavjit, and ask those questions so that, together we can all work to create a world that's just better for everyone.
Thank you, Rajan. Thank you, Sikh Coalition. Thank you, Harleen and Eileen.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Definitely. And one more reminder, as since for summer series, tomorrow is actually our last day. So if you would like to join, we would love to have you. We'll be doing a couple different discussions about Sikhs in Afghanistan, about understanding your children when it comes to mental health needs, and a bunch of other topics. So if you are interested, you can go to our website at sikhcoalition.org. And register for those additional sessions. Again, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Nagir Ji ka Khalsa, Bhai Ji ki Fateh.